Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Decoding the Unknown. As always, I'm your host Simon. Welcome to the show. Today, the Marfa Ghost Lights. How it works here, Katie has written me a script. I've never read it before. We're going to read it and explore it together. As we all know on this show, ghosts are not real. Yeah, t-shirt. It's literally a t-shirt. Look at that. Ghosts are not real. Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. It says it's not ghosts, doesn't it? Ghosts aren't real is another one I should do. Pick that up at the merch store below if you want to get a signed script. They're all signed live on air. Actually, they're not. Some of the older ones are not signed live on air, but they are signed by me. Some of them are signed live on air. You can pick them up in the description below. Let's jump in. And now I've got to read this first page with my signature all over it, which is a silly mistake. Marfa, Texas is an odd sort of place. The community of about 1,700 people is in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert. Okay, 3 hours drive from the nearest airport, yet it's managed to establish itself on the world stage in more ways than one. Its first, I've never heard of it. Hasn't established itself that thoroughly, has it, Katie? His first claim to fame is that an artist called Donald Judd turned up in the early 1970s, started buying up properties to renovate into art installations and exhibition spaces, and now, a few decades on, Marfa has turned into something of an art hub for hipsters who don't mind dry heat. The other reason Marfa is famous is for the lights, or Marfa ghost lights, strange dancing orbs in the sky that can sometimes be seen across the desert vista just before the sun rises or just after it sets. These lights, which were first documented around 145 years ago, have puzzled locals, tourists, and scientists ever since. Are they otherworldly? Are they dangerous? What rational explanations could there be? That's my favourite part of the show. What have dinosaurs got to do with it? Okay. So let's grab some high-power binoculars and sit out under the stars to see if we can unravel the mystery of the Marfa Ghost Lights. This video is brought to you by our good friends and long-time sponsor, and I'd say friend of the show, Surfshark. Look, if you're online, you need a VPN. That's not hype, it's just the reality of how the internet works these days. I use Surfshark because it is simple, it is reliable, and it actually does what it says. And I've used plenty of VPNs. A bit of VPN user before I was a YouTuber, then I became a YouTuber, and they all want to sponsor you for VPNs, and I'm not supposed to talk about competitors, but I'll talk about them in this way, Surfshark. How can you not be happy with this? Of all the ones I've used, Surfshark is by far the easiest. I've done it on my phone, my tablet, my computer, my laptop, my server, everything is just running on Surfshark, and there's no limit. So you just install them on all your devices and pay the same amount, which is awesome, because I use other services where they're like, oh, you want another user? Cough up, my friend. And then the next thing you know, you're paying nameless company, which isn't actually a VPN, but they'll remain nameless anyway, hundreds of euros a month somehow. And you're like, how did this happen? You can price privately, you can encrypt your traffic, you can spoof your location so websites think you're on a beach in Iceland. All right, copy. No one goes to the beach in Iceland. Who wrote this? Sorry, Surfshark. No offense. Or wherever you need to be. Who needs to be in Iceland? The only place I ever need to be is Miami to expand my Netflix library. It's useful for avoiding tracking, unlocking content, or just making sure that your data isn't floating around out there for anyone to grab. One subscription covers unlimited devices. You can have it running on your laptop, your phone, your tablet, everything. Plus, there's clean web, which blocks ads, trackers, and even malware. Yes, go to surfshark.com/DTU or use the code DTU at checkout to get 4 extra months. Yes, please. And now back to today's episode. The history of the mystery. If you've heard about these lights before, you may think that there's a very easy and mundane explanation for them, and we'll get to what that might be later on. What isn't so easily explained, however, are the very earliest reported sightings of them, because they go back a long way. Indigenous tribes, such as the Apaches, put the lights in the desert down to stars falling to Earth. Wow, I mean, stars are really far away, and if a star fell to Earth, it would be more like the star absorbing the Earth and the end of everything. It'd be like that movie Moonfall, except with a star. That movie's so stupid, but kind of enjoyable. According to the internet, the earliest reported sighting of the lights, at least as far as witnesses who weren't Native American goes, was in 1883. A cowboy called Robert Reed Ellison was doing his thing with his cows in the desert when he saw some strange lights shining on the horizon. At the time, he thought they might be campfires lit by the Apaches, who may have been noticing more falling stars at the same time. When other locals also mentioned seeing the lights, a small posse rode out to investigate but couldn't find any remains of campfires. Also in the 1880s, other reports from Texans such as O.W. Williams and Joe and Sally Humphreys cemented the strange lights into the desert story. Obviously, as these are known as ghost lights, there's some mystery surrounding the origins of these things, So let's get going with the possible explanations. Thank you to Redditor Internal Egg 9223 for suggesting this, by the way. Ah, yes, Internal Egg. Right. The Otherworldly and the Paranormal, as per a piece by Mark Lalanilla. Lalanilla? On LifeScience.com. According to eyewitnesses, the Marfa lights appear to be roughly the size of basketballs and are varyingly described as white, blue, yellow, red, or other colors. Reportedly, the Marfa lights, however, merge, twinkle, split into two, flicker, float up into the air, or dart across Mitchell Flat, the area east of Marfa, where they're most commonly reported. Going way back to what the indigenous tribes thought, the lights came across to them as falling stars. That's as logical explanation as any when there's no other context behind seeing some shiny orbs moving about in the distance. There may well have been comets and stuff like that witnessed in the night sky that got conflated with these lights over time. As Marfa wasn't founded until the 1880s, the lights were probably referred to as something else, if indeed anyone actually saw anything. There are other stories floating around that say things like the lights are lanterns held by the ghosts of Spanish conquistadors or represent the souls of the deceased Native American chiefs. But as the lights are usually observed from quite a distance and there are never any ghostly apparitions seen with them, this is obviously just made-up folklore. I do think these lights are real, right? I do think people are seeing lights. But there's got to be some... I feel like there are... the like orbs. What are they called? Orbs? Like, is it St. Elmo's fire or something? There's like reasonable explanations for why you might get glowing lights places, which I imagine Katie's going to get into. Because this isn't like, it was ghosts. It's not that kind of channel. It's like, it wasn't ghosts, and here's why not. Interestingly, lights have been seen in deserts all over the world with stories to match. Under one video of the Marfa lights, several people commented about Abu Fanos, a jinn native to Qatar and Saudi Arabia. If you're wondering about the deserts of the Middle East, don't follow this light because Abu Fanos is trying to lure you away until you get lost and probably die. Because these tales can't be verified, let's move on to this channel's favorite fall guys, aliens. People sit out and wait for these lights all year round without seemingly worrying about their safety or the safety of the planet in general, so it seems that these lights aren't behaving in a weird or aggressive way. In a filmed news piece for the Texas County Reporter in 1990, ex-pilot Fritz Karl was asked if he was ever attacked by a big ball of fire coming up and buzzing around you. Fritz got upset at this apparently made-up story and said, "I just can't stand that sort of prevarication? Prevarication? I don't know that word. He's using a word I don't know. Because, I mean, I'm not a genius who use words I don't know all the time. It's a gross miscarriage of justice to these little devils because they're friendly, okay? If you're familiar with the Knives Out films, I am, very much enjoyed them, Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc delivery comes to mind. Most people who say they've seen them describe the lights as friendly, and fans of the lights are out there trying to see a cool show, not get up close and personal with E.T. While videos and some blurry photos exist of the lights, they're usually taken from the viewing area set up in Marfa, so anything you can see is really far away. Nobody's got a close-up look at the lights to see if they are in fact attached to alien spaceships or what have you. The official Marfa Lights viewing center is a handy structure on US Highway 90 about 9 miles out of town. It's somewhere to set up camp for a few hours of light watching, and it has free telescopes to use, and more importantly, some toilets. As far as I can tell, the only close encounters people have had are occasional anecdotal reports of some balls of light rushing towards them, but there has not been much in the way of research into working out if aliens are trying to communicate. People just go and check out the pretty lights if they happen to appear that night, and then they go home. That's not to say that there aren't other slightly extraordinary explanations for these lights, of course. Jonathan David Whitcomb, founder of the Animal Discovery Organization, is a cryptozoologist. So like a zoologist, but not a real. Allegedly. He's convinced that there are pterodactyls still flying in the skies above Papua New Guinea. There aren't, mate. He hasn't seen them himself, but he has interviewed people who have. No, they haven't. Which is apparently the next best thing to solid proof. It's not. He's also not just filming people willy-nilly. According to animaldiscovery.org, bit of a lengthy quote here, Jonathan was in a unique position, probably the only person to ever search for a living pterodactyl, as a professional forensic videographer with practical experience interviewing persons while videotaping them. All right. So does that make you somehow qualified? Hang on a minute. Interviewing persons while videotaping them. Whatever next? Walking and talking at the same time? This guy's got the skills. 3 locals were interviewed about their alleged sightings of the creature known as a ropen. And this is what Whitcomb's site says about it. Okay, another quote. These videotaped interviews made it clear that the ropen is not just a legend, but a real animal. The American gave Gideon a subtle test of his honesty credibility by taking advantage of a statement contributed by the young native. Gideon said that the ropen he and 6 other boys had seen had a mouth like a crocodile. Whitcomb, sometime later, drew 2 similar sketches in the dirt, one with an eye socket similar to that of a crocodile, the other without that prominent eye socket. Gideon immediately chose the sketch that was clearly less like a crocodile. Okay, so either it's a weird crocodile, nothing at all, or, most likely, a pterodactyl, right? That's how it works. Definitely a pterodactyl. Did it have massive wings? Or did it have the weird eye thing? The quote continues, if the native had been telling a lie, he would likely have chosen the sketch that supported his previous statement. The quickness of his choice of the other sketch supports his honesty. What? That is not logic. That is not how logic works. I can't even explain how that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I'm having trouble working this one out. Okay, good. Me too, Katie. It's like one of those logic puzzles where someone tells you the truth and someone else always lies. Whitcomb didn't get any pterodactyl footage on his expedition, but he drew 2 examples of animals in the dirt, and one of his witnesses pointed to the one that didn't match what other people had said, so that was conclusive proof that he was telling the truth about what he saw, ergo there must be pterodactyls still in existence. What are you talking? No. This appears to be how Whitcomb's mind works, and I'll just say it right now, allegedly, Whitcomb's mind doesn't work very well. Anyway, in 2010, Whitcomb threw his 2 cents into the Marfa lights mystery by suggesting that the lights were obviously glowing pterosaurs. Of course, obviously. In a press release, he stated, oh my god, dude, no one cares. Although here we are, literally reading his press release. But we're being sarcastic about it. Quote, now a cryptozoologist from California has explained the dancing lights of Marfa. Tales of spooks may hold a spark of truth, for recent research implies intelligence directs the lights. Bioluminescent flying predators may be hunting at night and catching a few unlucky big brown bats. According to Jonathan Whitcomb, a cryptozoology author in Long Beach, California, when one of the bioluminescent predators has been glowing for a while, not far above the ground, it will be joined by another of its kind, which will then turn on its own glow. After insects had been attracted to that area, the 2 creatures will separate, which appears to distant human observers to be one light splitting into 2. The predators will fly away from each other for some distance, then turn back and fly together. During the separation, bats may begin feeding on the concentration of insects before being caught from 2 sides by the larger predators. All right then. You got anything to back this up? You're just making this shit up? Because I don't think you do. I think you're just guessing. And badly, because as we already discussed, your brain doesn't work brilliantly, allegedly, in my opinion. Needless to say, this explanation didn't really set the world of the Marfa Lights researchers on fire. It seems unlikely that nobody would have spotted these flying predators around and about other places, as presumably they'd have a slightly larger roaming territory than just that specific area of the desert. I guess we can't conclusively say that the lights aren't glowing pterodactyls, but, that hypothesis makes the dead conquistadors one seem a little bit less weird. Other, more rational explanations. Did you know that in 1952, Marfa was home to an American Army airfield? I absolutely didn't know that. There were lots of troops and training going on there from 1942 to 1947. In fact, the area where the viewing station is now is on the site of the former airbase. This brings 2 sides to the Marfa Lights conundrum. The first is that any sightings of weird unexpected lights zipping across the plains during those 5 years could easily be pegged to aircraft lights. People viewing them from afar might not be familiar with the types of aircraft being flown, and if there were any formations, etc., this would likely cause the lights to look like they were splitting apart. I must say, even though I know planes have lights and they frequently fly at night, there's been at least one occasion where I, in front of witnesses, have queried what those lights in the sky were, as they just seemed a bit odd to me. Of course, it was a normal plane, but still, the point is that many supposed extraterrestrial UFO sightings have ended up being standard or sometimes secret civilian or military aircraft. The other point related to the airfield is that if there had been any extraterrestrials or pterodactyls lurking in the area, it was being used all the time, and other pilots or ground crew mentioned seeing previously thought extinct pterosaurs or unexplained aerial phenomena. Yeah, and you'd think you'd then mention it. It's like, no, I was out last night, flying my jet around, doing some training exercises, and boom, pterodactyl. So let's move on to the more famous explanation of the lights. The way the viewing station is oriented, anyone sitting there is looking toward Highway 67, also called the Presidio Highway. Yes, it's been widely agreed that most lights people see seemingly moving across the air, disappearing before reappearing again, are just cars driving along the road in the distance. Yeah, why wouldn't you assume that? You'd be like, what's those lights? It's probably a road. Boom! It's like, what's that light in the sky? Could be a UFO. Or, get this, maybe a plane. Some observers think this can't be the case, but in 2004, researchers from the University of Texas at Dallas spent a few days actually looking into it properly by monitoring traffic on the highway using high-power binoculars from the viewing area and doing coordinated tests, such as flashing headlights from the highway. They're doing the Lord's work here. They concluded that yes, the lights people were seeing from the viewing area were just the lights of cars. Boom, mystery solved, end of episode. This is just Occam's razor the out of it. Michael Hall, who wrote an article titled "The Truth Is Out There" for TexasMonthly.com in 2006, begged to differ though. He'd seen the lights for himself many times over the years. Ah yes, some good old, not circumstantial evidence, what this is called. Oh, when it's just your opinion about something and it's not actually data. What's this called? Oh, the word's like right there on the tip of my tongue. Everyone at home is super frustrated with me right now. This is right there. Anecdotal, yes! To quote him, I've seen them at dusk and at midnight, in the summer and the fall, by myself and with other people. Well, I'm sure that makes a difference, doesn't it, Mikey? They appeared in the darkness south of US 90 between Alpine, too much Formula 1, and Marfa, yellowish white lights that glowed, faded, disappeared, and returned in different places. Sometimes they changed colours, other times they split apart, but these were not car lights. They didn't move like cars. Sometimes they just sat there. Yeah, cars would never do that. At other times, they were absolutely playful, moving and winking at one another. Hell, they danced. End quote. So, when he heard of the conclusive findings, his first thought was car lights, schmar lights. Ugh. Well, those losers at the university doing some actually objective study of this. Those guys, losers. 4 eyes. While Wikipedia called the researchers, quote, a group from the Society of Physics students at the University of Texas at Dallas, Hall called them a group of college kids, including members of the UTD Gun Club and a 3-day campout in the mountains. In other words, a high-tech frat party. All right, mate, chill. It sounds like you've got like an axe to grind. You know who doesn't have an axe to grind? The students who are out flashing lights on the highway and actually figuring this out. Also, what's them got to do with being a member of a gun club? What's that got to do with anything? It's also Texas. Doesn't everyone have guns? He sets out with some high-power binoculars of his own to stake out the viewing area and see for himself if the mysterious lights of his memory were just a bunch of cars after all. The next part of his article is titled, I Have Terrible News. For indeed, using a visual aid and clearing his mind of romantic nostalgia for just dancing lights, Hall is able to deduce that the lights he can see are, in fact, normal vehicles. Oh, okay. Wait, now I've gone from making fun of Mikey to being like, wait, this dude had a preconceived notion of something essentially non-scientific or even paranormal, like dancing magical lights. And he's like, no, I looked into it. They're just car lights. Holy respect for being able to change your mind, my dude. Let's quote him again. The pulsing, flaring, twinkling, blinking, and dimming came as the cars on the road lined up with or pointed away from the viewing center. I didn't see any merging and splitting, but that would probably come from one car passing another, maybe behind a curve. Ultimately, I could draw a straight line descending from the top left to the bottom right, and the lights were coming on and going off along that line. By the time they got to the bottom, right under Chinati Peak, they were almost out of sight. They were almost in Marfa. In that sense, they were Marfa lights, but there wasn't much mystery about them. Dude, fucking mad respect. I'm sorry for making fun of you. Another group from the Texas State University conducted a similar experiment in 2011 with the same conclusion. As per the article on unsolvedmysteries.fandom.com, quote, using sensitive infrared and ultraviolet spectrometers, they found that the atmospheric conditions of the land outside Marfa were unique. The conditions warped and distorted the lights coming from the highway as they traveled across the land. By the time the lights reached the viewing area, they would look like weird white floating orbs. End quote. Well, this was all to explain too easily, wasn't it? It's the end of the episode. Well, actually, not quite. You see, while these lights are easily explained by the highway in the distance, what about the lights seen before the highway was there, or the lights that have been described as different sizes and colours, some of which seem to float upwards? Well, I'm going to bet there was a road there before there was a highway. Like, it's not like, it's very rare, let's say, I think. just speculation, for there to be no road and then for them to build a highway. There's always an alternate road. Like, there's this big journey that takes forever, where I live, in Czech Republic, to go from Prague to Karlovy Vary in the north. Because there's no highway. There's like a bit of highway, then there's just B roads, and then there's highway again. But they're building a highway, and every time you drive it, there's more sections of highway being opened. And then you're back on the B road, and then you're on the highway, and then you're back on the B road. And it's like, well, that B road follows the path of the highway. And when that highway's done, no one's going to drive along that B road, but there was a road there in the first place. What about the lights that have been described as different sizes and colours, some of which seem to float upwards? Well, we just talked about that and the weird warping of the light over the land, which is obviously possible. Like, anyone who's ever seen a mirage knows that weird happens to light in heat and close to the ground and in different weather conditions. Or, it's not, outside the realm of possibility for even someone who believes in the supernatural to be like, oh, well, yeah, mirages are a thing. I know it's not actually water. Retired aerospace engineer James Bunnell knows all about the visible car lights, but stresses that the Marfa lights are actually something different. In a piece called What's Going On in Marfa on Cron.com, he states, the car lights move from left to right in a repeating pattern. The bona fide Marfa lights, which appear in the night sky only 10 to 15 times a year, look like balls of light that split apart, then melt back together. Some seem to stand still, some streak across the sky vertically, or more commonly horizontally. Sometimes one will turn off and another will turn on as if connected by a light switch. End quote. The 2011 Texas State University study also concluded with the lines, however, the group notes that there are some sightings that they could not explain, such as lights that move backwards, dance, or disappear suddenly. But did they see them? Because they went out for the weekend, or whatever, for their frat party / light spotting adventure. And they see it, and they're like, it's cars. At another time, it seems 10 to 15 times a year, so I'm assuming not on the evening that these students went out, there are these other lights. I want those students, with their rational minds, to go there for the entire year. Go on, go out there. And look at the lights and see if this happens at all. Because right now it's just one dude being like, no, not the lights from the highway. We know that the rest of the time, it's obviously the lights from the highway. But 10 to 50 times a year, it's magical orbs. So what might be going on with these lights? Well, now we come to some sciencey nature stuff. So hold on a second, we're going to have an interlude and circle back to the earliest sightings by Western settlers, because while we're on the subject of people having seen these lights before the invention of cars, now that's a more interesting one, how can we be sure that they actually did see anything? In other words, are the Marfa lights just a byproduct of our technologically developing world? Here's what we mean. Indigenous tribes in the area reported strange lights, which they linked to falling stars. Were these even what modern viewers call the Marfa lights, or were they a celestial event or something else altogether? We can't answer this, but we can go into a bit more detail on the 1880s reports. Yeah, it's very hard to be like, oh, okay, so these things happened in the past. There's nothing to study now. So we just don't know. Were there magical lights? Don't know. Was there a rational explanation? Probably. Did people actually see them? Who knows? I'm going to say maybe. Like, we just don't know. That's the problem. We can study what is there now, and it seems that what is there now is cars driving along a highway. Everywhere you look, Robert Reed Ellison is held up as an example of the first person to report seeing the lights, even though other people had already seen them because everyone knew what he was talking about. Remember, a group of people went riding off to investigate what they thought were Apache campfires but found nothing. This could have been anything. It could have easily been campfires and the posse were just looking in the wrong place. It could have been a celestial body. Again, as even now people don't always know what they're looking at in the sky, I'll refer you back to my plain light embarrassment, and we'll have another example of this later. Ellison didn't even technically report his sighting, as it was never written anywhere, just told to his family, who passed the story down. Not reliable. It therefore might have changed with time, and there wasn't exactly a lot of meat on its bones anyway, so relating a story about seeing some far-off lights and wondering if they were campfires doesn't seem like a strong link to the lights of today at all. Michael Hall, he of the Eye of Terrible News article, tracked down Rosemary Cox, Ellison's granddaughter, who still lived in the Marfa area. She had a memoir that Ellison wrote in 1937 at the age of about 70. In it, there's no mention of the strange lights he saw that one time, which might not be terribly surprising, as it wasn't really that big of a deal. Do regular people write memoirs? I don't know any regular person who's written a memoir. It's always I guess that's because it's just, you don't come across them. I guess people do. I don't know anyone in my family who wrote a memoir that I got to read, like my grandparents or anything. When Hall asked Cox if there were any other missions from the memoir, she said his wife and his family are savage. It seems like Ellison just wrote the book about his cowboy stuff and didn't even give his own wife and kids a look in. What chance did a few far-off lights have? It was only a few remembered sentences passed along over the years that tie them to this story. O.W. Williams also allegedly reported the lights, but again, when Michael Hall went looking, he turned up another example of a story that had been passed down a family tree without having ever officially been committed to paper. The other example from the 1880s you can find is a couple who reported seeing them in 1885. They're variously called Joe and Sally Humphreys or Joe and Ann Humphreys. Brilliant. So starting off with really reliable stuff. We don't even know the name of the person who reported them for sure. Solid. And the fact that they allegedly saw some lights is the only information you can find, so not very helpful. I also we can just ignore that. We can just absolutely ignore that. It's not even worth the 3-line paragraph that it's written on. I also belatedly came across an alleged sighting from all the way back in 1617 from a Captain Manuel Pedro Vasco, who witnessed the lights moving towards him and called them the lights of God. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any more information about this person apart from a few other web pages quoting the same event, so this is another one we'll have to put down to a historical anecdote. What this all comes down to is that we don't know if these supposed early sightings were the same thing that people are now seeing as the Marfa lights, if they were totally something different but explainable, such as far-off campfires, or whether they were nothing at all. Alright, yeah, I think maybe it's campfires, maybe they looked in the wrong place, maybe it's just old wives' tales. I don't know. It's impossible to know. With a rational mind, I'm going to assume there's a rational explanation rather than the magical one, but I absolutely don't know for sure. We can move on. Interlude over, so let's get back to some more explanations for what people have come up with recently. The sciencey nature stuff explanations. Could there be a natural explanation for these moving coloured lights? The phenomenon of St. Elmo's fire, mentioned that earlier, has been thrown into the ring, a reliable contender when it comes to weird glowing things that people can't easily explain. A quick search of my previous scripts brings back mentions of St. Elmo's fire in the Philadelphia experiment, Bermuda Triangle, and Flying Dutchman episodes, so I'm sure that Simon recalls the information very well and can explain to us what's going on. This is about... Isn't it something to do with, like, electricity and charges and glowing stuff, like, above the ground in balls? Look, I know Katie's challenging me here, and she's like, Simon's not going to remember. And that's about as much as I've got. So, over to you, Katie. Just kidding, here's a bit more about it. St. Elmo's fire is an electrical weather phenomenon, boom, just most often seen during thunderstorms when electrical discharge gathers around an object or a point. To use a quote I previously used in another episode to give you more of an idea, quote, according to electrical engineer William Betty, writing in Scientific American, quote, within a quote, St. Elmo's fire is a type of continuous electric spark called a glow discharge. God, please myself, I actually remembered it was some sort of electrical discharge. The other option was like gas escaping from the ground or something and catching on fire, but I think that's called something else. When it occurs naturally, we call it St. Elmo's fire. When it occurs inside a glass tube, we call it a neon sign. This could account for people seeing the bluish glows in the distance. However, it would not account for the movement of these lights unless they were attached to a physical object. It also wouldn't account for the differences in colours reported by witnesses, which have spanned the spectrum from yellow to white to red to blue. Alright, now let's talk about swamp gas or marsh gas. Boom! Also could be gas! There are some gases that, when they come into contact with oxygen, ignite to create a spooky glow. According to livescience.com, quoting, this glowing phenomenon, sometimes called will-o'-the-wisp. Boom! I remember that. Ignis fauci, or fool's fire, has been observed around the world, especially in marshy areas where the decay of organic matter can create pockets of phosphine and methane. End quote. Alright, that sounds good, but you may recall that our lights are happening in the middle of a desert, not a nice boggy marshland. The natural conditions could produce similar effects. However, as the article goes on to say, quoting again, there are significant reserves of oil, natural gas, and other petroleum hydrocarbons in the area, which could include methane in quantities capable of producing an effect similar to that created by swamp gas. Well, there we go. Easy. So many sensible explanations for this, isn't there? But no, it has to be ghosts. Sorry, that's a plausible explanation for some of the lights. Maybe. There's also the phenomenon of Fata Morgana. Wait, isn't that... Fata Morgana is what some countries, like I think in Czech, pretty sure that a mirage, which we were talking about earlier, is a Fata Morgana. Like, they'll say that. I don't know where it comes from, but I think that's why I know that it's mirages. This came up in the Flying Dutchman episode, could also be why I know it, sometimes called a superior mirage, where warmer air rests on top of cooler air, distorting our perspective and making things look like they're floating higher than they really are. The area where the Marfa lights are found is nearly 1,500 meters above sea level and in a desert, meaning there can be a large variation in daily temperatures, which can lead to the different layers of air needed for this effect to occur. The Fata Morgana effect could cause the car headlights to look like they're rising up, or other lights in the distance to look like they're in a different place to where they should be. Yeah, mirages are crazy. Like, I was fascinated by mirages as a kid. There was this long, straight road from where I went to school to where I lived. And we'd drive down that road, at some point in the day. I think it was usually in the summer or whatever, sun shining. And you see the mirages on the road, these huge mirages. And a car would come down and you'd see the reflection of the car in the mirage. And you're like, I don't know, I found that super interesting as a kid. I know it's just very easily explainable. And even as a kid, I was like, must be science, not magic. There's no one putting water or mirrors out on the road. But yeah, they can make things look really weird. And if you don't know, or if you're kind of inclined to the paranormal, or whatever, ghosts or aliens or whatever, then you may be like, that's weird, that's unexplainable by science, but in fact it's very explainable by science. As the Marfa lights are best seen at certain times of the day and at certain times of year, it seems to make sense that they'd be most visible when atmospheric conditions are lining up in this way. There are yet more hypotheses as to what might be causing these lights, though, so let's go back to James Bunnell, the retired aerospace engineer, because he pops up in a lot of the articles I read about this and is someone who's really tried to get to the bottom of it in a scientific way. Legend. He actually grew up in the area and went to Marfa High School, but didn't get around to investigating the lights until much later in life when he went back to his hometown and saw the lights for himself in the year 2000. We mentioned earlier that he differentiates between what are clearly car headlights and what he believes are the actual Marfa lights. He set up a rig of infrared and wide-spectrum cameras to record the light's activity every night and started studying the data. 12 years and a few books on, he couldn't find any discernible pattern in the light's behavior or concrete evidence for their existence, one way or the other. He's come up with a few suggestions over the years as to what's causing the lights, none of them extraterrestrial. One is a sort of plasma rain falling onto the desert. In the Texas Monthly piece by Michael Hall, it states, oh, is Michael Hall the guy who thought it was real? And then, yeah, it is, Mikey, right? He says, he speculates that the lights may result from all the high-energy particles or plasma that rain down from the inner Van Allen radiation belt. Wow, isn't that thing in space? But while most are absorbed into the planet, some, he thinks, may be repelled by the layer of volcanic rock in the Mitchell Flat, which behaves like a magnetic shield. The hot ionized plasma then shoots around, spitting and recombining and glowing like mad. It would be nice to solve the puzzle, he said, but it won't matter if I don't. I'm confident there's a natural explanation. I like you, Michael.
I just want to say I like you.
You start off being like, it's ghosts, and then you're like, no, science, it's plasma, it's radiation, it's coming down, they're bouncing around. Legend! Do you think he started off, this is how I would play it. I'd be like, no, I think it's ghosts. And then, because it's more persuasive to people who think it's ghosts, if you start by saying, oh no, I'm definitely a believer in ghosts, and then you're like, well actually in this case it turns out that because of this and because of that and because of this sciencey thing, E equals MC squared, and boom, that's what's happening. It's more persuasive, you know what I mean? So maybe that was what Mikey was up to. I don't think so. I think he's just a legend. For what it's worth, Bunnell's current pet theory is that underground friction occurring on the igneous rock in the area is producing a form of electricity called a piezoelectric charge, which results in the lights people can see across the plane. Another explanation could be down to the way each person observes lights, with one person's eye refracting light, which will be different to someone else's, meaning that some people might see things in the desert sky that others don't. Well, that's kind of cool. Michael Hall had another close encounter in his 2006 field trip to Marfa. Local woman Linda Armstrong had taken a video of a large, bright light that she said had been visible for 3 weeks and that, quote, seemed to be in front of the clouds. Hall camped out in her yard and was woken up at 5:20 a.m. by Armstrong telling him the light was there again. As per his article, why is he in her yard? I guess so he can see. It's like she didn't have a spare bedroom. She could have let him sleep on the couch or something so he could look out the window from the second floor. They're like, no, Mikey, out in the yard for you. I hope you brought a tent, mate. As per his article, quote, I grabbed my glasses. It was a glowing, bulbous teardrop of light, full of what looked like writhing snakes of fire. It was huge, bigger than any non-lunar thing I'd ever seen in the night sky, and sure enough, it was hovering In fact, it was Venus, the morning star, startling me and Armstrong the way it had other humans for many eons. I was crushed. He just goes out there, she's like, look, it's a glowing light. You'd be like, oh, for sake, Linda, that's Venus. Linda! Poor Michael Hall. He had his dreams crushed left, right, and centre. Linda Armstrong also admitted she must have been wrong about the light being in front of the clouds, just another corrupted memory to add to the pot. Unfortunately, because nobody can tell exactly where the lights are coming from, no one's been close enough to do any sort of testing. You see repeated requests to fly drones over the area, but A, drones are one of the suggestions for what the lights are, and B, it might capture a flash of light, but we still wouldn't know what was making it. I mean, I agree, but also more data is better than... More data, even if kind of half useful, is better than no data. Like, maybe you'll find something interesting. I'd get the drones out. Also, it seems like most people don't actually want to find out what they really are, keeping the mystery alive, and I suppose the tourist cash flowing in. Yep. Money. We've covered a lot of events on this channel, so I'm no longer surprised when some small town is putting on an event in remembrance of that time someone allegedly saw that acorn-shaped spaceship or string of lights near a body of water. I'm looking at you, Kecksburg and Shag Harbour. Marfa is no different. There's a yearly Marfa Lights Festival that started in 1986. Last year's lineup included a street parade, a pie baking competition, live acts including a DJ Crazy Legs, and, the highlight in my opinion, a visit from Carl the Camel. Who is Carl the Camel? Wait, what's that camel from Camel Cigarettes? Is it Carl? Wait, is a cigarette camel coming to the festival? What the f*** is that camel's name on cigarettes? Joe. It's Joe, isn't it? Smoking Joe or something? I'm sure he doesn't have that name today because it would be like, are you trying to make these appealing to children? I remember when I was a kid, my aunt smoked Camels, and I thought they smelled fantastic. I still think nice cigarettes smell really good. Cheap cigarettes smell bad, but like a nice cigarette, I don't smoke. But I'm like, that's a good-ass smell. If smoking wasn't bad for you, I'd smoke. At the time of writing, this year's lineup is yet to be announced, but it will probably be hard to top Carl. So, what are the Marfa Lights? This is an unusual episode because the Marfa Lights are still, really, a bit of a mystery. While many sightings can be explained by car lights on the highway facing the viewing centre, there are a lot of other lights that don't conform to this explanation. Allegedly. I watched some videos showing blurry blobs, some of which turned out to be dirt on my laptop screen, but there aren't any decent videos of crazy lights that show what people say they've witnessed, so it's hard to know what they're talking about. Michael Hall, in his Texas Monthly piece, mentions a family that arrives at the viewing centre, sees a light in the distance, exclaims they've seen the Marfa Lights, and then leaves. Who knows how they told that story to their friends. I mean, like, oh, look, a light. Yeah, no, we went to Marfa, we saw the lights. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's cars. Maybe it's ghosts. Maybe it's aliens. Maybe it's Will-o'-the-Wisp. Piezoelectric charge. What was the other one? Fata Morgana. Might some people be misremembering their experiences? Yes. Nobody really knows how far away the lights are. Therefore, you can't tell what size they are or how fast they're moving. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement and inflate your memory to match the current stories being told. Yeah, your memory. Always remember that. Might there be lights other than car lights? Yes, but there aren't many credible real-world explanations as to what might cause them. Any one of which, or a combination of which, would probably explain them. While there is not a single definitive answer as yet, the fact that there are several possibilities means that it's probably one of them, and not a ghost Apache chief or a little green man. What about the lights that predate the highway? We talked about this, just we can't know. Well, we talked about that earlier, and the frequently cited earlier sightings weren't officially recorded anywhere, just passed down in family stories, anecdotal, so they're not much more than hearsay at this point. A plaque at the viewing centre sums the whole thing up nicely. Quote, many viewers... Jesus Christ, this is a long plaque. Many viewers have theories ranging from scientific to science fiction as they describe their ideas of aliens in UFOs, ranch house lights, and Telmo's fire or headlights from vehicles on US 67, the Presidio Highway. Some believe the lights are electrostatic discharge, swamp gases, moonlight shining on veins of mica, or ghosts of conquistadors searching for gold. An explanation as to why the lights cannot be located is an unusual phenomenon similar to a miracle. Okay, don't overblow it, guys. Where atmospheric conditions produced by the interaction of cold and warm layers of air bend light so that it can be seen from afar, but not up close. The mystery of these lights still remains unsolved. I don't know, it's not a miracle. It's like, oh my god, a mirage, it's a miracle. No, it's simple science, and it happens often. Just a note here, I think they meant mirage and not miracle, but now it's on a metal plaque for all time. No. I usually find it similar to a miracle. Really? That makes so much more sense to call it a mirage. And they just have a typo on their, plaque. Guys, come on. To some witnesses, though, miracle definitely is the right word, and they won't let anyone tell them different. That's the end of today's episode. I hope you liked it. If you want to buy that t-shirt, if you want to get a signed script, you know what to do. There's a link to the merch store below, and as always, I'll see you next time.